Okay. So for anybody joining us in the recording or anybody not in the community joining us, my name is Courtney. I am the director of Tapestries, which is our memory support community here at United Methodist Communities at Pittman. I am a social worker by background, and I have a lot of years of experience in dementia care, senior care, traumatic brain injury, mental health, education, just basically all things brain related, in addition to my own family experience with dementia. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, and hoping to pass that passion and education on to all of you. So today we are talking about fostering family understanding, a dynamic that I see a lot with our families is that there tend to be one or two local family members that really take on the brunt of the responsibilities as far as caretaking and being there to support our loved ones. And then a lot of distant family members, whether that's, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, things like that, that want to be involved, but that because of distance or logistics just can't be as involved. And it can really complicate the way that you talk about what's going on with your loved one, because they may not be aware of the reality of the situation, or they may even disagree about what's best for the person, and they're not the ones seeing it in day-to-day life. And I just see it contribute to a lot of family conflict and tension. So hopefully today we can give you some strategies to help deal with that, and reduce it so that it makes your life a little easier. Okay. So just for starters, what are the things that get in the way? So like the obvious one is distance. If you are here local to the Pittman area and you have brothers and sisters that live in Florida or Texas or even, Maryland, they're just far away and they can't get here. Time is a big one. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be retired or to have flexible job schedules have a lot more of it on our hands. Maybe we have a lot of obligations on our time that prevent us from being there. Realistically, just ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of times those more distant family members have a lot of what they consider to be helpful feedback and advice. And it may not be very helpful, and it may even be very frustrating for those of you who are really close to the situation at times, because they just don't know the reality of what you're dealing with. And so what they perceive as being helpful and supportive can actually be kind of irritating, and they're not doing it on purpose or to be rude. They just don't know. And
understandable.
Yes. And so that's a big one. Emotional resistance. This is a big one. Sometimes just realistically, if we don't see the person a lot and we're not confronted with the reality of what they're going through a lot, we might see a lot of denial, just that inability to recognize a truth that's painful. We might see a lot of fear, whether that's, fear for the person and what's going to happen to them, or whether that's fear for themselves and their own ability to cope with it. I do sadly see some families where family members check out pretty much entirely once the dementia diagnosis comes along, because they just can't bear the thought of seeing their loved one go through that. They're just so scared of what it's going to look like that they would rather cut that loss than deal with that change. And it's, that's a sad situation for both people, and especially if you're the one trying to bridge that gap, that can be really hard too. And then we see a lot of apathy and helplessness, and these are kind of two sides of the same coin. It might be, why bother? Nothing's going to make a difference anyway. They've got dementia. It is what it is. We've just got to do it and deal with it. Or we might be like, why bother? Nothing I do is going to help. And so There's no point in me being there because I'm not going to change anything. And both of those mindsets can be really detrimental, not only to their own relationship with the person, but to our loved one with dementia and to our family dynamic when it means that things fall disproportionately on us. So lots of different ways for our emotions to get in the way, but those are the ones I see a lot. Lack of balance in caregiving responsibilities. This is a big one. So if you're the family member that's close by, you're the one responding to every emergency. You're the one running out to get new clothes and shoes. You're the one buying incontinence products. You're the one, at every medical appointment. You're the one they're calling at 3 a.m. because they think it's 3 p.m. All of that fun stuff. And when you've got your own life to live too, that can be really demanding. And sometimes we can get really frustrated with our siblings or our other family members for not being more involved and not helping relieve some of that burden. Differences in opinion is a big one. Maybe we disagree on what's best for mom, and then, what do we do? How do we resolve those those conflicts? And then differences in perception. And so this is kind of goes hand in hand with differences of opinion, but it might just be like that we see things differently. So maybe you both want what's best for mom or dad, but you have different ideas of what best looks like. Maybe one of you is the family member that's all about health and safety, and you're like, no, we got to watch the diet. We got to make sure we have them on this medication. She needs physical therapy. She needs this, she needs that. And maybe the other one of you is the family member that's like, we want her to be happy and she's not eating the vegetables. Can we please just give her a piece of cake? So, it's sometimes it's those little things and like how we define what good looks like, what successful looks like that gets in the way. So basically there's a lot of hurdles for us to overcome. And so we need to be able to negotiate all of those. So questions about any of this? Which ones do you find you struggle with the most?
I don't know. I tend to, my sister's been wonderful through all of this with my mom, and especially getting her settled, trying to get her settled. My sister's been wonderful. I don't see conflict or anything. I would probably be the person to say, let her eat cake. But we don't have that issue with mom, but that would probably be me. Just saying what kind of person I am. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any feedback from you, Beth?
It's hard a lot of times being the only daughter, in the vicinity. My sister's in Florida. My kids will come when I was just on vacation, but they have kids and they're working, but they will step up when they really have to. Otherwise, it's solo for me, but sometimes it's good because I don't have to compromise what best is, because it's just me making the decisions, and
Sure.
it's hard. I did have a friend whose sister down south was taking care of the parent, and the sibling living up here just said, I don't know what you're being so dramatic about. And it's because they weren't down there day in and day out. So it can be, what was the one you were saying? I don't know, apathy, or I don't know which, ignorance, or one of those things that some people, if they're not doing the day in and day out, they don't have any idea at a distance, so.
Yeah.
And so that's
that-
probably interesting for you because you are the person doing the day in, day out, and you're hearing them vent and thinking like, ooh, you don't really know the half of it.
right, yeah, but it's fine. I mean,
Yeah,
it's where she lives. She can't, so.
yeah,
It's just so many interesting things to say, but I do like how people can have different opinions, what best looks like. I didn't really think of it because you only think of your best, you don't think that other people
Mhm.
have a best.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's funny because everything is a spectrum, we say everything in moderation, we value that middle ground. But when we like actually focus on it, there's like so much room for interpretation. And I just think of things like if we go from a strictly safety perspective and you say that to somebody and they're like, well, yeah, of course safety is important. And it's like, okay, well, if safety is important, then we need to get rid of all of the knickknacks because those are things that they might knock over and break and hurt themselves on. And they always have to wear shoes, even in their own home, because that's going to make them less likely to fall and less likely to stub toes. And, they can't eat the sweets and the junk food because that's not good for their health. And they have to take all of these medications because we want, and like it gets more and more rigid the more safety conditions you add. And like we all
Yeah.
have to go barefoot sometimes, and
Right.
Yeah.
the knickknacks and the picture frames are the things that make it feel like home. And so like at what point have you gone too far, kind of thing?
Mhm.
Right.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to your point, Patty, I can say with so both of my grandmothers have had dementia, and I have one unfortunately deceased and one still with us. And we kind of had that learning curve of like she's diabetic, we can't let her eat the cake, and then realizing a little too late, we should have just let her do it,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And my parents are very quick to say, like, if they could do it again, that's the thing that they would change, is that they just would have been less restrictive on her diet,
Yeah.
because it's just a lot of fighting that they didn't need to do. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
so I'm
Yeah.
hopefully in that camp.
Yeah.
Glad I'm not alone.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Well, an example of that, when my father passed 13 years ago, he had passed in May, and that Easter, my mother, we went to the candy box, and my mother bought him a 2-pound Easter egg because he enjoyed his food. She was a good cook and a baker, and he enjoyed his food. And when he passed, and one of the comments my mother made was, "I'm so glad I got him that Easter egg because he really enjoyed it."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one of life's pleasures, it's just a life pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I love that philosophy.
Mhm.
Okay. So then the first thing we're going to talk about is how do we overcome the logistical challenges. So this is our time, our distance, our schedules just don't line up. Our work demands are unrealistic. Maybe you've got a sibling that's got a really demanding job, or a lot of kids that are all involved in a ton of activities, or both, and they just don't have, a lot of time to spare. So how do we overcome those things to keep them in the loop so that they do have realistic expectations of what's going on with our loved one? And so one of the easiest things we can do is schedule regular check-ins, whether that's a phone call once a week, once a month, whatever the case may be, where we're having a conversation that's strictly focused on our loved one and on what's going on in their lives. This is what mom's doing. This is what we're seeing. This is what's the same. This is what's different. These are the challenges I'm having. This is what's going well. She had a doctor's appointment this month. This is what the doctor said, those sorts of things, where we're just making sure there's an open line of communication about those things, because often that's, the biggest hurdle is that, when we've got our own lives to live and we're focusing a lot of time on taking care of our loved one, we just kind of get to let other people know what's going on, because A, it's one more thing to do, and B, it's like, we know it, like intuitively, because you're dealing with it every day. And so we don't think, oh, they have no idea what's going on. We just assume that they kind of get it. So making sure that we are having those check-ins. That's especially important when changes occur. So anytime there's a change, whether that's a medical appointment, you got some lab work that's a little funky, or, maybe mom or dad was doing a good job of getting themselves dressed and now they need a little more help. Maybe there's been a serious medical change, whatever the case may be. That's definitely a time you want to check in, because what you don't want is to have that loved one show up to the next family holiday and be like, what happened? And feel, you've been hiding something, or feel bad that they haven't been there when they could have supported you. And meanwhile, you've been stressed about those changes and not getting the support that you need. So definitely when changes occur, we want to make sure we're checking in at those times. We want to use clear, objective examples of challenges. So this is probably one of the most challenging parts, especially as family members. We're really close to the situation, and especially if it's something difficult or frustrating for us, it can really come across like, oh, mom was a real pain in the neck today. She just fought with me for everything. And that doesn't give our family a clear understanding of what's going on. So they might just think that that's the two of you butting heads, so they don't necessarily know what you mean by that. So we want to try, of course, if you need to vent, but we want to try to make sure our examples are clear and really describe what we're seeing. So when you're saying, oh, I was really frustrated with mom today, then why? What was happening? We had a doctor's appointment. She needed to get dressed. It took her 15 minutes to find her shoes. Feet they went on, but she wouldn't let me help her. Like very specific examples of what's going on, so that they can get a handle for, like, okay, it takes mom a lot of time to do this. She's misplacing things a lot. She doesn't necessarily remember how to dress herself. She needs a lot of support in those areas. That's all that information is in that clear example. None of that information is in that, oh my God, we just fought constantly today. And we want to make sure that we're balancing it with positive examples too. So nobody wants to be the negative Nancy that has nothing but bad stuff to say. Nobody wants to deal with the negative Nancy that has nothing but bad stuff to say too. So, and we don't want to give our family member the perception that things are worse than they are, or that there's no value and no good left in our loved ones' lives either, because that's really sad. So we also want to give examples of great successes, like, oh, we had such a good time today. We went to the diner and, dad made conversation with the waitress and had his favorite meal. Stuff like that. Again, clear examples. Dad can still socialize with people. Dad can still make conversation. Dad can still feed himself. Dad still knows what his favorite meal is. All of that information is in that story. And that way we're presenting a balanced perspective. That's important both for our, for giving our loved one with dementia, the respect that they deserve, giving our loved one who can't be present and be involved a more realistic picture, and helping ourselves kind of keep it in perspective, because it's really easy to focus just on the frustrating stuff. Whenever possible, we want to use photos, videos, and video calls. This is one of the most awesome things that came from technology and even from COVID, is like pictures and videos and video chats are way more prevalent, way more accessible. Use those things, especially for stuff that you don't know how to describe. Go ahead and let them put eyes on mom, like, hey, FaceTime you right now. Let's show you what's happening. That's okay. If they're far away and they can't get there for visits, maybe you do weekly phone, see them, and, you know, even if they're only spending 5 or 10 minutes on the phone, that's an awesome option. I know one of the things that we started during COVID, we take pictures of a lot of our activities and I send them out once a month. Pastor Kim is going to be taking over that in my absence, so hopefully you'll still get the pictures. But yeah, when you get those photos, send them to your family members so they can see them too. And that's a really great way to focus on those positive aspects, because the pictures we're sending are, you know, them baking cookies, or them hanging out with their friends, or them getting exercise and the gardening, you know, doing the good stuff, you know, the stuff that makes life worth living. You know, and then when we are having those conversations with our family members, we want to make sure that if necessary, if there is something to be addressed, like a medical need, or even, you know, a logistical need, mom needs new underwear, you know, dad needs new shoes, that sort of thing, that we're establishing priorities and next steps. This is what's going on. This is what I plan to do next. Anything you think I should do, anything you would do differently, you know, are you available to help with that sort of thing? So like, again, if you've got a lot on your plate and dad needs new shoes, they can online shop from Florida and send them here. Take that off your plate. That's a great help, you know? Yeah. So these to help overcome those, like, they want to be involved, but they can't kind of reasons. Any questions or comments about any of this?
When you send the pictures, say to me, and I had given you my sister's address and she loves getting the pictures also. So does my sister get all the communications, like say for this the Zoom meeting, or is it just for the pictures, which is fine?
I will have to double check. So I have kind of the way that I manage it is I have a lot of different groups contact.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
I believe she is also in my general family group, which is who I go out to, but I will double check that and make sure.
It's fine either way. I guess I could, you know, ask her. So, but yeah, that's great because it just keeps them informed. So,
yeah. And so Patty, I know you're relatively new to our community. So
yes.
So it's whichever is easier for you. If you prefer to be the point of contact, I can send those things to you and you distribute them as needed. Or you can have your family members get in touch with me directly and I add them to a group so that anytime something happens, group, and anytime something happens with Bernice or pictures of her happen, it just goes out to all of you. So what makes your life easier?
Yeah, that I would like you to send them to Wendy because it's just us two girls. So, you know, she would be happy to receive them. I know, as I would. So,
great.
Yeah.
So she'll just need to reach out to me, or you can send me her email address, whichever, you know, if you have it and can send it, that would be great. But yeah. So you don't necessarily have to do that right now, but
okay.
But I'll if I get it, and if I get it by Friday, I'll make sure it's on the mailing list for Pastor Kim too when she takes over.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So then the next major hurdle is that we talked about is ignorance, that they just don't know. And so this can look like a lot of different things. You know, there's a lot of ways to be smart. There's a lot of ways to not know something. And so it might be ignorance about our loved ones specifically. You know, if they just haven't spent a lot of time with them, or especially if, you know, if that was a relationship that was strained even before the dementia set in, there might not be a lot of connection there. And so there's not a lot of investment and not a lot of awareness to begin with. And both of those can be hurdles. So when we think about that type of ignorance, like that they just don't know who mom is anymore, just don't know who dad is anymore, we want to make sure that we're exercising patience and compassion. That can be very frustrating and challenging at a time when you're already using a lot of your patience and compassion to help your loved one with dementia. But the reality of the situation is that all of us, regardless of our situation, have the most capacity to change when we feel accepted for where we are. We tend, it's just a human instinct. When people criticize us, we tend to dig our heels in and do it and keep doing what we're doing just to prove them wrong. So if we are patient and compassionate and understanding of where our family member is, sometimes that actually helps move them along to where we'd like them to be a little more quickly. So again, offering those objective examples. If they don't know what's going on with the person, this is how we communicate it so that they can understand it in a clear way. And then we want to encourage visits and calls, and especially if there's any kind of strain on that relationship, or if they haven't seen mom or dad in a while, we might want to schedule visits that can happen together so that you can kind of support them through that. This is important both for your loved one with dementia and for them, because if your loved one with dementia hasn't seen them very much recently, they may not remember who they are, which might create tension in the visit, might create conflict in the visit. And your family member doesn't necessarily know what to expect or how to respond. And so, if you've been in a lot of these other family meetings, or if you go back and watch them, you know that how we respond to people with dementia makes a world of difference in the outcome of what happens. And so if they haven't been around to know that, they might inadvertently make the situation worse. And so we do everybody a favor by being involved and leading by example, if that's something that we can do. It might be ignorance about dementia in general. Realistically, there's not a lot of information about it. Even when you get the diagnosis, you take your loved one to the neurologist, you get the diagnosis, and at best, the doctor is giving you a quick and dirty, like, this is what you can expect, this is your options, this is what you do from here. At worst, they're telling you, like, feel free to check out this website for more information, and I'll see you in 6 months. And you're really getting nothing from them. And so, like, that's hard. But even separate from that, unless that doctor has personally experienced a loved one with dementia, they can know what that diagnosis means on paper, but they have no idea what it looks like in practice. And so how are they educating you about what to expect if they don't know? And so there's just, like, as much information as there is available, what that looks like and what that means for how we relate to our loved one with dementia is like a totally separate world. And so it's understandable that they don't have a lot of that information because it's hard to find. So whenever possible, we want to share what we've learned. And we want to do that in a way that we want to be mindful it's not coming across as like preachy or self-righteous, because none of us like to listen to those kind of people. If that's something that you struggle with, because some of us do, or if your family member just doesn't receive information well from you, because, sometimes, sibling rivalry and things like that, there can be a perception that you think you know it all, even if you're not acting that way. Feel free to lean on resources, and that includes, us, that includes these videos, that includes giving them websites or links or books that have been helpful for you. Just because they need to be educated doesn't mean you need to be the one to educate them. So if that's too much of a burden on you, or if they just won't hear it from you, or whatever the case may be, you can share what if it's successful and effective, but you can also be like, hey, this is what helped me, check it out. You
I
know,
just had that, Judy Fred recommended the book Celebrating Moments of Joy.
okay.
And so I got a copy for myself and my sister, and she had already downloaded it. But I have found that helpful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she passed that on to us
Mhm.
because of her experience, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great book. The 36-hour day is a great book.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to check that one out. I don't know if you have small children in your family that interact with mom a lot, but if you have like grandkids, great grandkids who are a little younger that don't get it, there's a phenomenal children's book called The Remember Balloons.
Mm.
That just it'll bring you to tears. It makes me all emotional. But it's great for helping little kids understand what's going on. Like there's a lot of great resources out there. And it's great that you were able to connect with her and she was able
Yes.
to pass
Yeah.
things on. I really find, you know, word of mouth and other people who have been through it are the single greatest sources of support and of knowledge, because
Yeah.
they've really seen it. Yeah, you know.
Right.
Sure.
Or watching, I think I learned best from watching my cousin take care of my dad's sister. I didn't realize how much I was learning the times that I was visiting and spending with her, that I'm using everything she did, I'm using now, and was just able to be more understanding, in addition to, you know, your these Zoom meetings we have, which bring to life a lot of these things that I have seen some people do. But it's, you know, you can learn from listening, but to actually watch someone in action, how they treat someone, and just how they talk to them and help them move, and just in the moment things is where you can really learn, I think, a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So true. Mhm.
And the flip side of that now is like, if you're helping your family member so that they can be that person for your loved one as well,
Uh-huh.
you can be that example that was so valuable to you.
That's
You know,
yeah.
Mhm.
leading by example is hugely powerful,
Mhm.
especially for times of conflict and things like that. You know, if they're like, mom, just put the shirt on, and they're fighting and it's not getting anywhere. And then you're like,
Uh-huh.
here, you step in and approach it a different way. And suddenly she's willing to put it on. It's like, huh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
you know?
very helpful. She would
Yeah.
lock my cousin out of the house, and my cousin would, you know, knock on the door, and she would just say something like, "Who are you? Go away." So she said I would just walk away for a few minutes and come back and knock at the door again, and she'd let me in the second time. But we're just watching how she handled each situation. I took it for granted then. Now I'm appreciative, because it's like, oh, you know, I get it now, and
Yeah,
I can do that
Yeah,
now. You know,
definitely.
so it's helpful. They can watch you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or you, yeah.
And so definitely we want to share what we've learned. We want to lead by example. We want to offer resources. And so like these videos, those books that we mentioned are great. Lots of great websites out there. We've recently put a couple of brochures together that are like at a glance information. If you know, so if you're in and you want to grab one of those, you can. Notifying them of upcoming appointments and inviting them to participate in them can be a really great way to get them information, especially of the more like dense kind, you know. So if they have no awareness of dementia whatsoever, and you're taking mom to the neurologist anyway, go ahead and, you know, and Zoom them in, FaceTime them in, so that they can answer or ask any questions of their own, or they can hear it from the doctor's mouth themselves, so that they're getting that information, you know. And so this kind of connects, and we talked about this a little bit almost in our examples, but about what to do, about how to respond, you know, about how to engage with our loved one. again, share what we've learned, lead by example. We want to be patient with them while they're learning, because they're going to make mistakes just like we do. And we want to offer directives and options. So like, hey, that doesn't look like it's working. Maybe try this, or like sometimes this works with mom and sometimes that works with mom. Because realistically, people with dementia are different moment to moment and day to day. So what works one time may not work the other time. So giving them options, strategies that might match their, their style or where mom is on a particular day, and allowing for success. So this is a big one. If you know what works and what doesn't, don't give them the examples that don't. So,
Right.
and sometimes it's silly things that we don't even mean to do. So I'm going to use like a really oversimplified example, but think about how many, movies or cartoons have you seen where people are up on something really high and someone will say, don't look down.
Right.
So it's funny, but saying don't look down and telling somebody what not to do actually increases the odds that they're going to look down.
They're going
Right.
to look down.
So instead, we're going to offer what they should do. Look up.
Mhm.
And now, rather than thinking, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and then fixating on it and looking down anyway, you've been directive with just the, the success strategy. It doesn't guarantee they won't look down, but it reduces the odds because you've given them something else to do with that energy. And so, like I said, it's very simplified, but same concept here. If we're telling them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, try this instead. If they forget what they're supposed to do and what they're not, or you've put an idea in their head telling them like, make sure you don't do that, and they wouldn't have even thought about it, and now it's in there rattling around, we've accidentally increased the chances they're going to mess up. So, so it's just kind of a weird thing about how the brain works. So, any questions about this?
No.
No.
I'm
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. So then we're going to go to emotional resistance. And so this was the one that had a bunch of different categories. So I kind of broke it up here. So when we find that our loved one has a lot of denial, the single best thing we can do to help them break down that denial is to give them opportunities to spend time with our loved one. Because if they're in denial about what's going on, there's no amount of you telling them that's going to convince them otherwise. It's a waste of your energy, because they just aren't going to be able to picture it and aren't going to be able to realize that it's true. So we want to, whenever possible, create opportunities for them to be with our loved one with dementia and see it firsthand. So the kind of tricky part to this, and where you need to be prepared, is that for some loved ones with some certain extremes of denial, they might actually get worse before they get better. So sometimes if somebody is really stuck in that, like, you're making a problem out of nothing, you just are trying to like, control everything, that's not really a problem, mom's fine, dad's fine, whatever the case may be, we might actually see that the more time they spend with them, at least initially, that they are looking for examples to prove you wrong, which can be really aggravating.
Yeah.
So I guess you've experienced that a little, Beth?
I've seen it in other situations, but yeah, so yeah, of course, it would be the same in this too. But yeah, people look like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And they'll, it's a little bit of confirmation bias, they'll see one thing go right and they'll kind of say like, well, see, this right here is proof that everything you said is a lie. So, It can be very frustrating, but we want to keep in mind the more time they spend with the person, the
Yeah.
harder it'll be to maintain that,
Yeah.
kind of delusion, for what lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So we just keep encouraging them to spend time. And during that time, use loving patience with them. Again, they have the most capacity to change when they're accepted for who they are. So if they're saying, what are you talking about? She's fine. She had this great day. She did this great thing. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad you had a really nice visit. I'm glad you can have time like that. When are you coming back?
Right.
Maybe it was really good for mom to spend that time with you. When are you coming back? And just really supportive, really encouraging, and keeping
Mhm.
them involved. Because the more involved they are, the more likely they're going to see the reality, both of the good and of the challenges.
They need to see him at sundown.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
listen to-
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like flipping a switch. It's really,
It's a whole nother world after 4:30.
is.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
they could be good in the morning. Seems to be a better time, but when that time comes, it's when it'll really reveal itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you encourage them to visit at different times of day so they can see that too,
Yeah.
So absolutely. So when our loved one is coming from a place of fear, they're scared about what this means for the person with dementia. They're scared about what it means for their relationship. They're afraid of losing them. They're afraid of maybe the multiple losses that come with dementia, because you're kind of grieving different parts of your loved one a little at a time sometimes. Whatever that fear comes from, we want to offer compassion and understanding. Again, offer opportunities for success. Go ahead and relate to that. You're in that boat together. I'm confident that you have your own fears about your loved one. I'm confident that you have your own worries about where this is going and what happens next and how you'll manage it and all of that. And sometimes the best way to address those uncomfortable feelings is to air them out. Sometimes things seem better in the light of day, than they do when we keep them all bottled up. And so if can relate to, even if yours is maybe more manageable or you're better able to compartmentalize it than they are, go ahead and share that experience so they know they're not alone. And we share what's helpful for you. We want to model positive interactions and boundary setting. So again, that leading by example. One of the things that I'm really big on is if you come to visit and the visit takes a turn for the worst, it's not doing you any good. And maybe you planned to stay for 2 hours, but if you leave after 1 and have 1 good hour instead of 2 hours of bickering, that's better, so feel free to step out.
Yeah.
And let them know that they can too. If it becomes too much, it's okay to step away. It's okay to put those boundaries in place, and even good to do it, because better to come back and know where the limit is on a good interaction versus a not so good one. We again want to focus on positives, and we want to make sure that we're checking our perspective, and checking their perspective. So just like I said on that first slide, sometimes we both want what's best for mom and dad, but we disagree on what that looks like. Sometimes that same difference of perspectives gets involved here when we think about that fear. So if your loved one is totally absent, maybe you say, to encourage them to check their perspective, maybe you say something to the effect of I know this is hard, but this is the reality of where mom is or where dad is, and they're not going to be around forever. And are you going to regret missing this? This is hard, but are you going to wish you had this time back when they're gone? And encourage them to think about it, because that's the reality of the situation. We also need to check our own perspective, because it might be, again, that we're trying to control how they relate to mom, and maybe they're doing it just in their own way, and it's just not how we would do it. And so maybe we're pushing them to do more than they're really capable of, or to do things more the way that we would. And so every once in a while, we've got to reality check ourselves. I know this is a big one. Like I said, my grandmother who's still alive and experiencing dementia, my mom and I disagree on what to do and how to respond to her all the time. And I kind of am like, I deal with dementia every day, Mom. I know what I'm talking about. And she's like, well, she's my mother, so your opinion doesn't count. And both of us have valid points, so so sometimes we have to kind of, check ourselves too, and make sure we're not stepping on toes or convincing ourselves that there's one right way to do things.
Right.
So when it comes to apathy, again, that it doesn't matter, it is what it is, nothing's going to change anything. This is a great opportunity for education. A lot of times that what does it matter, nothing's going to help, is based on ignorance. So we want to provide education. We want to make sure that there's a focus on but there is stuff we can do, early intervention helps. There are things we can set up to make our lives easier. There are things we can set up to make mom or dad's life easier. There are treatments that can prolong good quality time. There's, all this stuff. So the dementia diagnosis isn't going anywhere, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. And education can be a big part of helping break that wall down. And that doesn't mean you have to be the one to provide that education. You can just point them in the right direction if it's too hard or too conflicted to be the one to give that information. Or if it's just too complicated, because the treatment stuff is very complex. So helplessness, again, education. So this is that perspective of I don't know what to do. Why bother? Because I don't know what to do. Nothing I do is going to help. I'm just going to make things worse. I'm just going to get in the way. We're just going to fight, whatever the case may be. And again, education, but this time with a focus on the power of the quality of life, that there's value in just spending time together, even if you don't really know what to do with that time. There's power in maintaining that relationship. Just showing up means that your loved one is going to remember you longer. Just showing up means your loved one is going to have fewer moments of loneliness. And the reality is that 10 minutes after you leave, they may have no idea you were ever there. But for that time you were there, you were always there, because they are masters of mindfulness, and that's the only moment they're living in. So there's value in that. As far as they're concerned, while you're there, you've always been there, and that's valuable. We want to empower with strategies, let them know what we've learned. If they're worried about fighting with mom, if they're worried they're not going to know the right thing to say or do, hey, this is what I do and it works. This is what, this is, maybe try this, that sort of thing. And again, this opportunity to check our perspectives. Are they not actually helpless, but are they in a place of acceptance? And so I can say realistically, I'm a fixer. I have always been a fixer. So if I see a problem, even if it's something completely out of my control, I'm still going to try to put a Band-Aid on it. And I'm probably going to drive myself crazy doing that. So there are times when I need to check that perspective myself. And again, when my mom and I disagree, and I might need to hear, you need to chill out because this is what it is, And so that may be what's going on here too. So again, taking that moment to take a step back and make sure, are they actually the ones grounded in reality here? Am I trying too hard? Because sometimes that happens. you know? And then that perspective check can be good for us too, because that helps us take a break and take a step back from something that's really not worth the time and energy we're putting into it. Thoughts or questions about any of this?
No, very informative.
Good.
I mean,
Yeah.
Wendy and I are pretty much on the same page with everything. And, but I can see myself in some of the comments that you made, like trying to be the fixer, you know, I that's, the information is good. Yes.
Well, good. I'm glad. That's the whole. And so I figure I come at it with both the from my own family and my own experience and the professional, like this is what works on a broader scale perspective. And realistically, sometimes I know exactly what to do when I'm talking to you about your family, but I am totally lost in the sauce when I'm dealing with my own family. You know, that's just when you're situation, it's harder and it's different. And so, you know, I try to be honest about that because I don't want you to feel like I have all the answers and I do everything right, because I certainly don't. So, okay. So then our next one is unbalanced caregiving. And so this is, again, the bulk of the burden is falling on you. So we want to, if we're going to deal with this, we want to consider what the cause of the imbalance is, because if the cause of the imbalance is that logistics, they're just too far away. They just don't have the time, you know, they just don't have the resources sometimes, you know, like maybe mom's care is expensive and they don't have that kind of money, that sort of thing. We're going to deal with that in a different way than if it's an issue of control. You know, like it's an issue of like, no, I want you to handle everything, or I don't want to be involved, that sort of thing. Because those are two completely different perspectives, you know. So we want to consider, if distance is the issue, if logistics and time are the issue, what things can we outsource to them? You know, this is what mom needs. Can you set up the Amazon subscription? This is what mom needs. Can you do the on shopping and ship it here so that I can have time to go to this appointment instead? If it's an issue of capacity, what are they capable of? Whether that's physically capable, mentally capable, emotionally capable. Then we want to play to individual strengths. I have a lot of family members, you know, where one's a banker and one's a nurse. Let the banker handle the finances. Let the nurse handle the medical stuff, you know. You know, one's a lawyer, one's a teacher, that kind of thing. Let the teacher handle the socialization. Let the teacher have the visit. Let the lawyer handle the paperwork. You know, making sure that the power of attorneys are in place, any trusts are in place, you know, like that sort of thing. So, and those are just career type examples, but realistically, we all have personal strengths too. You know, if one of you is naturally more patient, guess who gets to be the one that deals with mom when she's in a difficult mood? If one of you naturally has more time and more flexibility in your schedule, guess who's going to all the appointments? You know, like that sort of thing. By all means, play to those advantages, because if you already have no time and then you have to squeeze in an extra thing, it's going to feel that much harder, you know, because of that, where that would be an easy thing for the other person to do. And vice versa. And that way we can kind of have some more balance. So, so find creative solutions. What can be shared? What can be done differently? And what can be done at a distance? You know, that shopping can be done at a distance. Phone visits can be done in a distance, things like that, to help make your life a little easier. Be honest about your needs. This is, I think, a big one. Sometimes we don't get help because we don't ask for it.
Right.
You know, and especially if you're the family member close by, or if you're the family member with more time on your hands, So you're just naturally stepping in and taking. It might not be that they don't want to help. It might be that they've got the perception either that you don't need help or that everything is taken care of. So you need to be honest with them, like, hey, this is what I need from you. Whether that's helping with appointments, whether that's just like, I don't want to go visit her 3 times a week. Can you please check in on her on Saturday? Like I would like to go to the beach instead, kind of a thing. That's okay. But we have to be honest about what we need with our family members, and also with ourselves. And so again, like just a personal example, I'm that fixer and I'm sometimes that martyr, and this I get honest from my mother because we both follow. We want to be the one to do the thing so that we can feel good about the fact that we did the thing. But if you're overwhelmed with doing the thing, you might have to recognize that it's okay to let somebody else take that credit once in a while. You don't need all the validation. You don't need all the reassurance that you're doing a good job. Sometimes you need a break,
Yeah.
So we also have to be honest with ourselves about our own needs. And make sure we're communicating clearly to our family members when we need something from them. And consider family respite. So one, respite, I have respite here in quotation marks. Respite care is an actual thing. It's almost like a hotel with nursing staff, where you can check your loved one in. And so for the two of you, your loved ones are in care facilities. You don't really necessarily need to worry about that. But if they were still at home, or you just needed a break, that's an option. You can put them in a place for a week, for a month, whatever, while you take that time for yourself. But we can also do what I've seen a distant family member, schedule your vacations together, So if you really need a break, or you've planned a cruise, or you've planned a trip to the beach, or whatever it is, have your sister, have your brother schedule their trip to visit mom at the same time so that they're there to fill in the gaps that you normally take care of. And that way, there's a family member looking out for your, for mom or dad's best interests, and you can get the break you need. And it's great when that's out. We've had a couple of family members that do manage to do that. They know their brother or sister is going to come spend a week every summer and every holiday season, and they try to line those up at the same times they're going to visit other family members or go do other things, so that there's always kind of somebody nearby, and that's an awesome solution. Any questions or thoughts about this?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I like the idea. I think I might see if I can see if my sister could do a video call, like if I because maybe when I had COVID or we couldn't come in or something, I set up a video. I think you folks put an iPad or something for my mom in the dining room or whatever, and you knew we set the time up, and I called, and it was probably for 3 minutes because there's not, it was hard to carry on a conversation too long, but that was great. But that might be something I can like put on my sister to step up to do, because she doesn't call. It's hard because my mom doesn't really answer the phone. So it's kind of hard, but and she doesn't really call me to see how mom is. I'd like to just put something on her to step up and do. So that might be, I don't know if I can arrange that, like a once a month, whether it's the first of every month or something at, I don't know, 1 o'clock, that she could set up a FaceTime or whatever you would make it be. Like, I think that would be, that's a great suggestion, to try to do something like that, that she could, kind of step up and participate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, on her own. Yeah.
And so, if you, it's if you do video calls while you're visiting mom and, and you're calling her, that's one thing. But if the whole point is to give you a break, she can absolutely schedule those with us directly. We have an iPad, we can put her in front of Zoom,
Yeah.
and we can be there to help, to help mom navigate the technology so that your sister can talk with her and you don't have to be there to facilitate it. That's definitely something we can do.
Yeah, I would like that, because I would just like my sister to do something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so then our last kind of barrier to communication that we talked about was differences in opinion and perception. And so to deal with those, we're going to consider individual strengths, backgrounds, and relationships. So this is, again, what I said, if you've got a banker and a teacher or a lawyer and a nurse or whatever, or even just different personality traits and skill sets that make you, better at certain things or more flexible in certain situations, play to those strengths, to definitely do that. We want to also consider, how does their relationship with your parent differ from yours? And how is your relationship with each other impacting? So there's a philosophy in child development that says that no two children have the same parents ever. And so both of you have sisters.
Mhm.
And so you have the same parents, technically, biologically on paper, but no two people are the same. And so you and your sister likely had different needs. And so sometimes mom and dad probably handled things differently with each of you. So the relationship dynamic might have been different. Like some families really swear there's a favorite kid, some families swear. I know, I know for my own family, there's a huge age gap. My oldest sister is 47 and my youngest brother is 23, and was definitely raised in a different way than
Yeah.
I was 14 years older than him, or than she was 24 years older than him, for sure. So no two kids have the same parents. So you might have a different relationship with mom, or with dad than your sibling does, that might be affecting the way you view things. You might have a tense relationship or a different relationship with each other that changes how you feel about about what's going on with mom or dad. Maybe the two of you have always fought about certain things, and so just on principle, they're going to disagree with you about those things, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure to keep that in mind, and kind of try to work around those communication differences and around those relationship differences when we're trying to figure out how we work together for mom and dad's best interest, despite those challenges. Some of the common things that I see that create differences of opinion and perception. So common dialectics for dementia caregivers. So a dialect, it's just a fancy word. It's for things that seem to be opposing, even though they can both be true. So, feeling like the world is falling apart, even though you know that it's not,
Mhm.
wanting mom to be safe and healthy, but also letting her eat the cake, that sort of thing. So again, some of the big ones that I see a lot that tends to cause conflict between family members when they're caring for, their loved one with dementia: safety versus autonomy. Do we wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them in, in a protective little square and control everything they do because safety is the ultimate goal? Or do we allow them freedom of choice? Do we compromise some safety concerns that might be milder or lower risk to let them feel more in control of their lives? Is a big one, and again, it's like that example of just like being able to walk around their own bedroom barefoot. Yes, they might have an increased risk that they trip or slip, especially if it's a hardwood floor or tile floor. But do you wear your sneakers up until the minute you lay down in bed? And like, is that a manageable risk? Is that a risk we can handle another way? Get mom a cane, a walker, have a chair there so that she has something to grab onto, whatever the case may be. Prevention versus acceptance. This is a big one. In the early stages, sometimes some family members are like, no, we got to do everything we can to keep them as good as possible. So they need lots of healthy foods, lots of exercise. We need to get them on fish oil. We need to get them on the Aricept. We need to do this and do this and do this and do this so that we can slow the progression as much as possible. While other family members are like, whoa, that's a lot. How about we just make sure mom's happy?
Mhm.
If we're forcing mom to go to the gym and take 6 pills a day, she's probably going to be pretty mad at us,
Mhm.
and so those two dynamics. And of course, that's an extreme example, but that's kind of just to highlight that prevention versus acceptance mindset. And then the big one, quantity of life versus quality of life. Probably one of the biggest conflicts I see between family members is that some family members are so afraid of losing mom or dad that they want to take every precaution, while other family members are watching how hard it is for mom or dad to live like this and are saying, you know what, maybe losing them would be a blessing.
Mhm.
And that's a huge difference. And so finding that balance and making sure that we're kind of coming at it from the same perspective. And then one of the other major conflicts is medical and financial decision making. This is most often where I see families fight, especially in the event of medical emergencies. If our dad falls and breaks a hip, and one of you is like, no, they need the surgery to repair it, and the other one is like, they can't handle the surgery to repair it, and they're not going to do rehab, and maybe we have a difference of opinion, that's like a major issue. Or how to spend mom's money, like if she needs round the clock care, do we pay for round the clock care? Or do we save the money in case we need to put her in a home and we just figure out how to work the round the clock care, like that sort of stuff. Those can be incredibly tense conversations. And so we need to think about, in these moments, whose priorities are these? So when we're looking at those dialectics, those differences in perspective, those what's more important. Is this my priority? Is this your priority? Or is this mom's priority? And whenever possible, it should be mom's or dad's priority.
Right. Mhm.
Wendy
and I agreed on a lot of that. It's what's best for mom.
Yeah.
That's how we look at it. It's what's best for mom, and we move forward, whether, it's, we all have hesitation for things because we don't know. This is a whole new journey that we're on. And, but we have agreed on that, that it's whatever's going to benefit mom is what we do. So.
Yeah. And it's great that you have that experience.
Yeah.
I wish that all families had that experience, but realistically they don't.
Yeah.
And so, and especially at a time, if our loved one is in the more progressive stages of dementia, like more moderate or even later stages of dementia, where they can't clearly communicate what they want. And so it's much easier to get focused on, what I want versus what my sister or brother wants. Take a step back and like, what would mom have wanted, or what would dad have wanted when they were able to make this decision?
Mhm.
Because, and so I can tell you, the generation gap is very different. And so my grandparents had the perspective of, I'm going to take care of my parent until I can't anymore, until they pass. They're not leaving this house. And then having had that experience, there was like, it was really hard and it wasn't always what was best for them. Maybe I should have gotten more help. And so my parents have been very forthcoming with like, I took care of mom until she passed. I don't want you to go through that. Please put me in a home, you know? And so I have the benefit of having had that conversation already. But you can think about that. Like what would mom have wanted? What would dad have wanted for himself or herself at a time when they were able to make that decision? And what would they want for you? Because they might not want you to be driving yourself up a wall to take care of every single need, because they want you to live your best life too. And so kind of finding that ground. We want to use pros and cons, and we want to consider, so I've got this little chart here on the side. We want to consider the pros and cons both of making the decision and of not making the decision. And so I'll use the broken hip example here just to kind of highlight what I mean. The pros of intervening. So the pro of getting the surgery, we're going to repair the hip. She's going to have a faster recovery. She's going to have less pain long run. She's going to have hopefully more mobility long run. Those are great things. The cons of intervening, she's not going to understand what's happening to her. She's scared. She's going to go to rehab, which is going to be a change in environment, which might be stressful for her. And she's going to have to go through surgery, which is incredibly strenuous on the body and on the mind. And anesthesia can have permanent consequences for people with dementia. So we risk that if we put them under anesthesia for the surgery, that they may not wake up the person they were when they went to sleep. We also want to look at the pros of not intervening and the cons of not intervening. So the pros of not intervening means mom gets to come back home sooner, and we can get her the care that she needs to have her be successful despite the broken hip. We can give pain medication so that we're still keeping her comfortable, and she can be in a familiar environment. She can go about her life. She doesn't have to be scared in the hospital. She doesn't have to be scared at rehab. The cons of not intervening: is she going to have more pain? Are there going to be long-term consequences? Is she going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life? Those sorts of things. So we have to think about all of those aspects. And then we might have to determine, like what's actually best once we've looked at all four of those. And every family, some families are like, you know what, the surgery is worth the risk. And other families are like, you know what, I'm not going to put mom through that. And both are right. Both are right. It's about, risk versus benefit, and making sure that we choose what's right for our loved one based on what they would want for themselves and what we think we can accommodate. We want to consider middle ground and sharing responsibilities and being flexible. One of the things that I see a lot, especially where family member is local and another is distant, is that distant family member is like, no, you have to do it. Because it's real easy for the sibling in Florida to be like, well, you have to get mom to the dentist twice a year, and you have to get her the surgery, and you have to make sure that her dentures fit, and and it's easy for them to say that because they don't know that that's like 6 different appointments and a lot of arguing with insurance that they don't have to deal with. If they can make all the rules they want when they're not taking any of the responsibility. So we have to kind of put that in perspective for them at times, and find that middle ground and be flexible, and vice versa. We might have situations where the shoe is on the other foot, but that's a dynamic I see a lot. And it's always, I'm always very ooh, for the family member that's close by, because they sure know how to lay it on thick and make you feel like you're doing a bad job if you don't do what they think is so important. But it's really like much easier for them to say it than it is for you to do it. And then the last one is especially when it comes to medical and financial decision making, ultimately, who's really in control? And so I hope for all of you, for all of my families, that it never comes down to this. But realistically, when there are multiple siblings involved and multiple different opinions and priorities, there should be one person who is designated as the power of attorney. A lot of families will do it. This person is the power of attorney. If that person's not available, then this person is, kind of a thing. And that's fine. But it really should be laid out in such a way that there's either one distinct person who's in control or that there's a hierarchy to control. That sounds horrible, but too many cooks spoil the soup, you know? And so when you're in that emergent situation, you know, where mom is laying on the stretcher in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and you have two completely different sets of opinions about what's happening, if the control is shared evenly, it might be too late by the time you come to an agreement, you know? And so like it sounds bad, but there may be times where if you're the designated power of attorney, if you're the person in control, you have to be the bad guy and say, well, I'm the one mom put in charge and this is the decision I'm making, and you're going to have to be okay with it, you know? And that can be a really hard thing, but wasting time fighting, especially in emergent situations, isn't doing anybody any good. And so we just kind of have to acknowledge that reality. Any questions or thoughts about any of this?
Now, my husband's a twin, he's a twin sister, and luckily they were co-power of attorneys, and they did, I think, very much alike. They agreed on everything. There were 5 children, and the twins were, you know, co-power of attorneys. And, you know, I guess you've probably seen a lot, but they did work together well, you know, so I was glad for that. But I think my sister would agree with anything I'm doing. I would just like to, I think it's more like out of sight, out of mind, that she just doesn't even call to see about anything, or I just like to get her to participate, you know, but I think she would probably wouldn't disagree with most, I think, but I think she does think, oh yeah, she should see the dentist twice, you know, and have that list of things, but yet she's not doing it, you know, and that kind of, but
and I see both things. I see family members share the responsibility and it goes beautifully, but I know realistically for every family that I see where there's a shared responsibility and it works well, there's 3 families where it doesn't.
I've seen it too.
So if you're the family where it works well, count your blessings, because know that you're the minority. It's a really, you know, a really challenging situation. So it's just very hard.
Well, I'm sure you've seen a lot and a variety. You've probably seen
Sure you have,
every kind of reaction. So
it definitely definitely a lot of different experiences. So it's kind of weird. But it's funny how different every family is. You just really don't know.
Well, I think early on it was a good point you made, that everyone thinks their best. Everyone has their own best, and they
true.
You know, you just see things from your perspective, and it's hard to see it from someone else's, you know, and so that's just a good point to remember. Maybe why it's hard for 5 people to be the equally a power of attorney. That's not going to work.
It's really hard. And in those matters of perspective, it's really just, it's not that anybody is wrong, you know, that's the hard part. Like nobody is right. Nobody is wrong. Everything is just different, but those differences can be really hard to negotiate. And so sometimes You know, you just have to be willing to be the bad guy and say, this is what we're doing, you know, and that's a hard thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, or really just trying from the perspective, what would mom or what would dad really want?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
ultimately I think that's the best strategy, especially the more voices are involved. That's the best strategy for resolving it, is like, what would they have wanted?
Yeah, they
Mhm.
probably agree on
True.
that.
Yeah. Because we can all have our different opinions, but there's only one of them, you know, and ultimately they're the one at the center of the issue. They're the one that has to live with the consequences. And so that's definitely, you know, the root of all of our decision making should be, what did they want?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so I want to thank you for joining me, and for, you know, being so participative in the conversation. I love that. It makes it, you know, I think way more informative and way more fulfilling. So, as I mentioned, like, this is normally the point where I would say, like, what do you want to talk about next time? What else might be a good topic? And so with me going out on maternity leave, that's a bit of a challenge. So this will be my last live meeting for a while. I am pre-recording meetings for the next 6 months so that they will still happen once a month. So you'll still get those emails. It'll just be a link to the recording so that you can watch it. And my supervisor, Pam Garofolo, will be the person who's available to answer any questions. So her contact information will be in those videos. And so if you have questions, comments, you know, personal situations or experiences where you're like, hey, this is what's going on, and I'm not sure what this means for that kind of a thing. She is a wealth of knowledge and experience. She's been doing dementia care forever. She went through it with her own mother. So again, she has both that personal and that professional side, and she's just brilliant. So she'll be available to answer questions, and even when I'm not. So that said, our next meeting should go out about the 3rd week of the month. So you'll get that, you know, around the 20 something, I think. And the topic of conversation that day will be coping with changes and challenges. So, you know, realistically, like I said, our loved ones are different day to day, moment to moment, you know, week to week, month to month, sometimes with dementia. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, like, what are the changes we can expect? What do we do in the moment when that change happens? You know, when the thing that worked with mom the last 6 months suddenly doesn't. What do I try differently? And then also, how do I deal with that? Because it's really hard sometimes to watch our loved one change that rapidly. And it takes a pretty significant emotional toll on us. And so how do I keep it in perspective so that I can cope with what's going on too? So that'll be next month. And
Okay.
Pam will be available to answer any questions you might have.
Great.
That'll be good.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Best wishes with your little boys.
Oh, thank you so much.
Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Yes.
I'm trying. I'm doing a lot of sitting. This modified bed rest is not for the weak, I'll tell you.
How funny, ironic.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a sitter, so it's very hard.
But you
Yeah.
have to do it, so you do it, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
Well, you won't be sitting a lot once they come.
No.
So
That is
sort it
true.
out now.
That is true. So I got to
Yeah.
soak up all the rest I can get.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
so much, ladies.
Bye,
Have a
Beth.
good night.
Bye, Trish.
Bye-bye.